Hello everybody, my name is Natasha Kaplinsky and it is my very great pleasure to be hosting a series of interviews for you today, including with my next guest, Sujata Bhatia, who is Chief Operating Officer for mobile bank Monzo. Now, founded in 2015, Monzo is reported to have 4.7 million customers, and Sujata joined the organisation just a few months ago, so during the pandemic, and prior to her appointment, Sujata spent almost 16 years at American Express, so a huge amount to talk about with Sujata. Great to have the chance to connect with you, Sujata, online. Now, before we dive in, if you could start by perhaps giving us a bit of an overview of your role, where you currently are, and then we'll start talking about where you've been later on.
Sure. So I'm the COO at Monzo. It's a pretty broad role spanning both strategy and execution. So like at the macro level, the way I define my job is I'm sort of the guardian and enabler for the business. And my goal is to make sure all the teams are successful so that Monzo and our customers can win. I have direct responsibility though for marketing, ops, and people, which is about 70% of the headcount of the organization. So my day-to-day is pretty varied. And for those areas, specifically for marketing, I've been focused on product launches and customer engagement. For ops, it's maintaining our award-winning customer service, but at an efficient cost and in a growing business. And then from a people perspective, I'm focused on org effectiveness and leadership development. And I also spend a lot of time hiring at the moment too.
You're a very busy lady, it sounds like. So, of course, you moved across from American Express earlier on this year, where you held the role of SVP and GM Head of Europe Global Merchant Services. How have you found the move, and what has impressed you most about the Monzo business?
Yeah, it was a pretty big move after 16 years at a global financial services mainstay to a fintech startup. I also joined in June in the midst of the pandemic, so I was onboarded completely remotely, and it was the smoothest process I've ever seen. So that was great for me to experience how a tech-led business like Monzo was able to react really quickly to the new normal. The company moved our entire workforce to remote working overnight seamlessly, so pretty impressive and a very good first impression. I think the thing that has impressed me most, though, since I've arrived at Monzo, which I kind of knew about, but I really feel now that I'm here, is the culture. So hugely customer-centric, very mission-driven. People who work at Monzo don't do it just because they want a job. The talent level is really high. And even in a pandemic, these people are courted. So they're here because they're motivated by customer impact and to push forward the mission that they strongly believe in, which is making money work for everyone. And even remotely, you can feel that.
Well, that's brilliant to hear that you've had such a smooth transition. Must be very strange, though, not having physically met many of your colleagues.
It's true. I actually met a woman that works for me the other day, and in my mind, she was like 5'9", and I met her, and she's just little. She's 5'1", and I couldn't quite adjust. So lots of little surprises.
It's the new normal, isn't it? So, as we said in the introduction, 4.7 million people in the UK putting their trust in Monzo to take care and manage their money. What are the business growth plans for the next 24 months, and how, if have they, been impacted by COVID-19?
So I think we're quite an unusual story. So, of course, we're not immune to the challenges that our businesses are facing right now, to the economic climate and the impact to customers, but we also know that's temporary. As I said, we were in a good position when the pandemic hit. And since we didn't have to spend our time figuring out how to work from home, we could just get on with things. And so that meant in the middle of the pandemic and working remotely, we've been able to launch 3 new products: Monzo Business, Monzo Plus, and Monzo Premium. And all 3 have seen phenomenal organic growth and really exceeded our expectations. I think our proposition overall is really suited to the current environment. It's really been sort of a tailwind to drive customer adoption of a fully digital proposition. So when it comes to our current account, we're seeing really impressive organic growth with over 20,000 new customers signing up every week, and that's without any marketing. We're also consistently one of the top UK banks that customers switch to. So going forward, we're really focused on extending and driving that profitable growth that we've seen through 2020 and beyond. And for that, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing, building products that our customers love that also improve their financial lives.
I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, how many organizations have really benefited in many ways from the opportunity to go digital. And if you're a digital company already, you're on that front foot. So
Exactly.
on the positive, COVID-19 in many cases has pushed innovation, hasn't it, much further up that curve. How do you feel that you have changed as an organisation, and where do you think the industry might be with the pandemic behind us?
So I think for us, it's really just helped us focus in even more on the value of our proposition and double down on our proof points. If I look at the industry more broadly, there's sort of two things happening. That shift to online spending and then the shift to digital payments. And so I think that shift to online spending will be somewhat sticky. We've certainly seen that when we look at our customers. If you just look at their online spending, if you just take out grocery, which is obviously an outlier category, we've seen that increase by 50% during lockdown. But even when restrictions have eased, it stayed higher than pre-lockdown level. So there is definitely a shift in terms of spending behavior. I do think, however, there's still a place for the high street. And of course, over time, hospitality will rebound. And then from a digital payments perspective, more people are paying using contactless than ever before. We recognize that, and we've increased our contactless limit to £100 to keep our customers safe. I think that shift to contactless won't be felt as hugely in the UK because pre-pandemic, 1 in every 2 payments was already contactless. But in other countries that were behind, like the US, you will see, I think, a long-lasting shift post-pandemic. And then I think, we just talked about it, but very pragmatically, people have also recognized, the ease of having a bank that sits in your phone during a time when there are restrictions on movement. And so the CAS stats tell us that the trend has continued. And I think post-pandemic, there'll be no looking back.
Really? You feel it's an opportunity? Won't be any looking back?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, let's talk more about that then, and innovation in general. What would you like to see develop going forward within the industry? Looking ahead to the next 12 or 18 months, if you like. What will become a reality that's a dream at the moment?
So the last time there was a crisis, like in the global financial crisis, the banks were the villains. And I think this time we have the opportunity to step up and become part of the solution. So to be the heroes or the heroines. And so I'd like to see the industry evolve beyond the mission to move or make money, to also embrace that role of providing kind of financial and emotional support to customers, in particular customers that are vulnerable or struggling. I'd also like to see banks doing more to build products that address the link between money and how it affects mental health, which is a big topic of conversation right now, and rightly so. So innovations like our gambling block, which we've had in place for a couple of years and now has widespread adoption in the industry, our Share With Us button, which is essentially like in-app traceless messaging, and it helps those who are affected by financial abuse have sort of a quiet cry for help. And we know that's worsened during the pandemic. I'd like to see that more widespread across the industry. I don't really care where it starts. I just want to see it everywhere. I participate in the FinTech delivery panel, and I'm helping out on the work stream that's all about financial inclusion. So for me, that's where I'd like to see innovation happening in the next 12 to 18 months. And then, this is just a personal one, and I'm not sure I'd call it innovation, probably more like hygiene, but I'd also like to see the industry move the needle on diversity and inclusion. We need a fundamentally different mix of people at the table. And the data shows that more diverse teams drive greater customer and shareholder outcomes. So for me, that's something 18 months from now, I'd like to look back and see that we've done across the industry.
And picking up on that, working from home maybe gives that diversity a bit more of a push.
Possibly. We do know that the tax on working moms is more significant in that, working from home remote pandemic environment. But absolutely, and that's just one demographic of diverse and inclusive, right? But absolutely, it should allow for, an equalizing across a lot of different demographic segments. And I hope that's what we'll see.
Okay, let's look forward to that. Let's talk about the business banking service that Monzo launched earlier this year. Can you give us a bit of an update, if you don't mind, on the progress and also the plans for the future within the SME space? And I do appreciate that you've had to kind of hit the ground running in your role and having to take on board lots of information.
Well, to be fair, thank you for that, Grace. I will say I spent 10 years in the SME space prior to joining Monzo, so it's actually a segment that I'm really close to. And I know this customer segment, they have tremendous positive impact on our economy, on our daily lives, but they're also extremely underserved. So Monzo Business is actually one of my very favorite parts of Monzo and something I've leaned into pretty heavily since I joined. The success so far has really exceeded our expectations. particularly if you think about, we launched in the midst of a pandemic and just before the first lockdown. We already have more than 60,000 business customers. I think that's largely, and I can't claim any credit for this, it's due to the fact that the product was really built in a very Monzo way. So the business banking team worked very closely co-creating with 100 or so businesses and how they developed the product, understanding their needs, their wants, their frustrations to deliver something that really solved problems and helped them focus less on banking and more on running their businesses, which is what every small business owner really wants. So I think that co-creation led to lots of insights and innovation, like tax pots, which basically automatically sets a percentage of your income aside for tax when you're paid. And there's many other things. I think looking forward, there are a couple of highly requested features we're excited to bring our customers, like international payments. And we're also looking at novel ways to help businesses tackle like that age-old problem of getting paid. We know a lot of business owners, that delay in money coming into your account is their biggest source of stress, frustration, and economic viability. So too many SMEs have to wait weeks and weeks for a simple payment to come through, particularly in the age of faster payments and open banking. So we're working on something to help our customers solve that.
Okay, I like the term Monzo way. Let's talk about open
I've learned
banking.
it in the last few months.
The Monzo way. Let's talk about open banking. There are definitely some dissenting voices, aren't there, around the world. It hasn't really set the world alight, they say, whilst consumer adoption is most certainly on the upward curve. What does true open banking success look like to you, and how do you feel that we're going to get there?
Even when I was an incumbent, I was a big fan of open banking. So, for me, that message hasn't changed. I think the vision of open banking is the right one. And yes, the adoption has been slower than we hoped. I think, unfortunately, for too many incumbents, this is more of a compliance exercise than a future business vision. And that fear of cannibalization is a big barrier to adoption and seamless industry standards. Really doing the bare minimum as opposed to really thinking through what could enable a phenomenal customer experience. I think that transparency and democratization of data that is provided by open banking is not at all at odds with the goals of commerce. And so for me, success is everybody viewing it that way. It's looking at all the financial players working together to embrace open banking because it's good for customers. And it is inevitably where the world is headed. Even in countries where it's not part of regulation, you see that's where it's headed. So, I think if we roll forward the clock a few years, everybody being an equal player in that evolution is success.
Why do you think it's taken longer for everybody to take it up?
For some large incumbents, it's oftentimes viewed as a compliance exercise and a threat to their core business. And so, and often shuttled into sort of the backwater part of the business from, to be able to become compliant as opposed to really being embedded in future business vision. So the payments and banking is a difficult industry, and it is, it's like moving an oil tanker. You got to move it a few degrees at a time while you're moving full steam ahead. But really, I think it's a bit about prioritization and seeing the promise of open banking and having that universally recognized.
Yeah, and perhaps that's where COVID has given it a bit of a push, because during the pandemic, certainly seen a definite spike in open banking payments. And many believe that, of course, this is the next stage in the value chain. How is Monzo taking advantage of that?
So we have a few different things that we're doing from an open banking perspective. You may have seen our Easy Bank Transfer, which is powered by open banking technology. We've integrated that technology into our new connected accounts feature. So that's available to customers who use Monzo Plus and Monzo Premium. And that lets a customer add 14 other bank accounts and credit cards to the app. And it gives them complete visibility over all of their finances. We added Amex recently too. So in a nostalgic moment, I was happy to see it was the #1 most requested feature from our community of Plus users. But the easy bank transfer part of that goes much further and enables the customer to see balances and transactions and move money around between accounts really seamlessly. I'd say for us, that's been a big success. We know from talking to our customers that the connected accounts feature is the most popular feature when signing up to Monzo Plus. 25% of our users are saying it was the main reason they opted for the Monzo Plus product. So that's just an encouragement for us to do more and more in that space.
Interesting. Let's talk now a bit more about customer authentication, making payments, of course, much more secure. In its purest form, this has happened. But what, in your view, or what is your view rather, on customer adoption, and what do you see the key teething problems being?
So SCA, the drivers of it to make payments more secure and reduce fraud are really great ones and the right ones. And I think, Europe has led the charge in this over other regions. And so for that, it is to be commended. I think it's also pretty well acknowledged now that the challenges with making these kinds of sweeping changes, given the fragmentation and complexity of the value chain in the payments ecosystem, were dramatically underestimated. There are also some specific sub-industries like hospitality where structurally the change effort is much more significant. So I think the industry was slow to wake up to the challenges and slow to respond. And a lot of work had to first be put into education of merchants, of PSPs, of issuers. I think it's also fair to say that the regulation added confusion. At times it was too vague and other times overly prescriptive. And you've seen the acknowledgement of that with the delays to implementation timings that have happened across Europe. It's inevitable, though, and customers want it. It's the right thing for the customers. For us, we're 100% behind it. It drives better customer outcomes. We actually implemented it before the deadline, and we've been spending our time and efforts on customer education. But I think that implementation is the lowest bar. So the key is for everyone to be focused on customer experience. So not just the outcomes of SCA, but reducing friction and providing a seamless user experience. And that's where we are focused on an ongoing basis.
Is it possible to highlight your key frustrations?
I think particularly at point of sale, there has been less thought put into some of the limits that are put in place, and it hasn't really been given an industry perspective. So I think it's made it hard for certain categories of merchants to develop really good solutions that are friction-free for customers. And so having the bar not just be compliance and implementation, but a friction-free user experience, I think is the more important goal.
Okay. I'm very aware of the time limits that we have. Can you reveal any exclusives that you might have on the horizon? It strikes me that you're really pushing Monzo forward and that it's a very exciting place to be right now. But what can we see over the next 12 months? Is it possible to predict with the pandemic and the limitations that we have, what you might be able to achieve?
Yeah, we have some great plans in place. I mean, so look, we launched 3 new products while working remotely during the pandemic between Plus, Premium, and Business Banking. So I think people can be pretty excited about what and how much we'll do when coronavirus isn't kicking about. There is always a big idea or two being worked on at Monzo. Nothing that I'll share today, but we have some really good innovations in store. So watch this space.
Okay, I'm not going to be able to get an exclusive out of you.
Not so much.
Okay. All right, well, then I'm going to ask you another couple of personal questions, if you don't mind, because it was a massive move from Amex to Monzo. And I'm wondering what was behind that. Presumably the fact that you had agility and that you could pivot as an organization and have much bigger impact.
Yeah, exactly that. I think I had an incredible run at an incredible company surrounded by incredible colleagues that really felt like family. So nothing that I was running away from. But for me, it was an exciting time to be on the other side of disruption rather than being disrupted, to be the disruptor. And it felt like the right time in my career to do that. Also, the pandemic really felt like, an opportunity and a need where I knew that I could come in and make a huge impact for the business. And that's really what motivates and inspires me. The COO role, which is really about kind of lifting all the ships across the organization, is one that I've done before and gives me a lot of personal satisfaction. So for all those reasons, when I married that to customer-centric, mission-driven organization and something that I could get behind and I thought would make an impact in the world, it felt like the right time to make the leap. Some people might think I'm crazy, but
I don't think so. I don't think so. And with the benefit of hindsight and the success, no doubt you'll have, I'm sure everyone will fully understand why you made that move. And then, as one woman to another, you've really smashed that glass ceiling, haven't you? A woman in this industry, which is a really hard industry to break. What advice might you give to other women trailing in your wake that look at you as an example and would like to follow suit?
I think I'd say a few things. One is you have to keep your eyes on the horizon and the bigger picture. I mean, I think better than anyone. There are definitely going to be times when it won't be easy. And in that moment, you'll really be tempted to do the math and say, maybe at this exact moment, it's not worth it. It's kind of similar to working in a fintech. You need to just be able to, keep your eye on the horizon and see what that larger goal is. I think it's really important to understand your support team and be thoughtful about who you surround yourself with. Nobody is a one-woman show professionally or personally. I'm certainly not. And it takes a village to move it all forward. And I think something else I'd say is just don't fall into that perfectionist trap of feeling like the woman who needs to do and control everything, because there'll always be things outside your control. A lot of other people, particularly of another gender, are usually very comfortable with that. And you can't do everything, nor should you. And I actually think more importantly than all of that, I think the thing I would like to say to people is that while you're getting there, bring people with you. I don't want to be recognized as what you just said, which is one of the few women who smashed through. Success for me is to be surrounded by talented women at my level, below and above. And I would like everyone to define success that way. And I think that way we will all be, in a good position a few years in the future.
What a lovely answer. And my last question then is back to that pandemic. Of course, without wishing that it was upon us, do you see it as an opportunity in many ways for Monzo?
I think for us, there are obviously some business headwinds around customer spending and travel, but certainly from a customer behavior adoption and underlying trend perspective, it's much more of a tailwind. When I see how much we've been able to accomplish as a business during the pandemic, I'm only more optimistic for when that's over and what we'll have in store. So it's a pretty exciting time.
And how are you ultimately going to measure your success?
By our mission. Have we actually changed people's financial lives? Have we changed their relationship with money? Have we driven innovation across all of the industry? And then obviously the shareholder returns need to be there. But most importantly, have we achieved our mission and really transformed our customer lives?
Well, we certainly look forward to following your progress, Sujata Bhatia. Thank you very much for your time today. Thanks.
Thanks so much.